While filming in Philadelphia, we paid a visit to the historic Wilmington and Brandywine Valley, which is an area that is considered part of America's garden capital, boasting over 30-plus public gardens within a short distance from one another. While there, we stayed at the historic Fairville Inn in Chaddsford, PA, which was built in the early 1800s and is on the National Register of Historic Places. It was a short drive to Mount Cuba Center, which we visited with the goal of learning about the reforestation techniques, which we covered in an earlier video. The timing was fortuitous though, because we also got to see some of the earliest trilliums emerge, which are woodland ephemerals, many of which are native to the region, but we often don't get an opportunity to see due to intense deer browse and illegal collecting, for instance. Now, Mount Cuba maintains the National Living Collection of Trillium, with an emphasis on native wildflowers in eastern temperate forests of the United States. So we met up with Amy Highland, the Director of Collections and Conservation at Mount Cuba Center, to take a closer look at the emerging Trillium.
So here we are at our first Trillium.
This is a perfect plot for Trillium.
Oh, isn't it just?
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite parts about the garden is you find these secret little vignettes. They're almost created like little rooms.
Yeah.
And then you're walking along, you're looking at all the special things, and then bam,
Yeah.
Trillium pusillum.
Okay, so this is what again?
This is Trillium pusillum, one of the first trilliums to open in the spring, also one of the smallest trilliums. It's just so delicate, makes you want to, pick it up and wear it as jewelry.
Where is this native from?
So this is native to here. There are several different varieties that are native to different parts of eastern North America. Like most Trillium, it likes access to a lot of water. It needs a rather pristine habitat to thrive.
And what do you mean by pristine?
Of course, there are a ton of threats that affect Trillium. Everything from white-tailed deer to hogs to human land development, right?
Hogs. Do you have wild pigs here?
Not yet, but they're coming, and they're coming fast.
Really? Are you serious?
Yes, yes.
Who let out the pigs?
More recently, they get released into the wild for hunting, and then they escape and they breed. They crossbreed with domestic hogs, and you end up with a really awful situation for rare plant conservation. Deer, when they come up to a Trillium, they'll take a single bite and they'll walk away. And the Trillium reblooms next year. It comes back from the roots. But when a hog comes after a Trillium, it uproots the whole plant and it completely takes away its ability to reproduce at all. So the roots are gone, it can't produce seed, and it starts the whole population at ground zero.
Is it officially a tuber or a rhizome? What is it?
It's a rhizome,
Okay.
But it's a very delicate one. It breaks easily. One of its major ways of repropagating itself is through that rhizome, so it will tend to break off and form new plants next to each other.
When does it actually first flower?
This is about now, is when it first flowers. So I start looking for Trillium in mid-March, but I never really find them until late March. So I would say this is the perfect time for Trillium pusillum, early April.
How long does it take it to get from like a seed to flower, or from like if you get a rhizome, will it flower the next year?
No, they also don't like disturbance. So if you get a seed of a Trillium, you're committing to at least 5 to 7 years before you're going to see a flower. Trillium's one of those plants where it puts up a single leaf that first year, and it might hang out as a single leaf for a long time if it doesn't get enough nutrients or that kind of thing. If it does get enough nutrients, if the growing conditions are right, by that second or third year, you'll have 3 leaves. By the 5th year is when you're going to have blooms.
What got you into Trillium? And maybe I should have asked this, but we started walking and we saw Trillium right away and we got distracted. But what got you into Trillium and this particular, Mount Cuba Center and everything?
I grew up in Michigan, and in Michigan we have these giant sweeps of Trillium grandiflorum, a white Trillium that will just cover the hillsides there. And when I was very tiny, we thought, oh, this is just a wildflower growing in the woods. And we used to collect bouquets of these things for my grandmother every Mother's Day. And it wasn't, of course, until I went to college and started learning about rare plant taxonomy and rare plants in particular that I realized just what we were doing to those populations. So that I ended up here at Mount Cuba Center working for the conservation of trilliums is really poetic justice. I owe it to these plants after everything I did to those wild populations.
So you're making it up for them.
Indeed.
For everything that you did as a youth.
Exactly. And you know, every kid has that impulse. You know, we all have the hunter-gatherer instinct to bring things in. And I love that about children, and I love that when they come here. But I think it's also important to let people know that it's not as simple as picking up pine cones. When you take flowers, you're actually taking a piece of that plant's ability to move forward.
So this one you said is native to here. I have never seen this plant. And I mean, that's probably a telltale of, like, you know, you have massive amounts of disturbance. You may never actually see this plant growing in the wild. And so when you told me this species name, I was like, that's not native to here. It must be native somewhere else. But it is.
Yes. Certain versions of it are. And it's much more of something that I find in the coastal areas than I find like right here at Mount Cuba Center. But you're absolutely right. You know, here in Delaware, we are within a 3-hour car ride of a third of the population of the United States. Land change here is intense. And that means that a lot of the flora that was originally found here is no longer here. So when I say I collect plants that are native to here, that's true taxonomically speaking, but they aren't necessarily genotypes from here. I might have to go to Maryland to find one, or I might have to go to southern Delaware.
Right. So what's the one that's behind you? It's not in flower, but it's
So this is a
about
sessile
to.
trillium. So trilliums come in two forms. Sessile, the flower right on top of the leaves. Pedicellate, they have this little pedicel, this little stalk pulling them up. This one will open in a couple of weeks, and it will be a red flower.
I like how the tortoise pattern on the
Oh, isn't
leaf
it
that's here.
fantastic? Many trillium have that mottled leaf color, kind of mimicking the pattern of sunlight through the trees on the forest floor.
And Trillium is special in the sense, of course, you have the word trillium, but it has threes of just about everything, right?
That's right. 3 petals, 3 leaves, 3 sepals, 3 ovary sections, 3 of everything.
And here's something, is that the same as what we saw up there?
Yes,
Okay.
it is the same species. It's a different variety. This one is Virginiana.
And what makes it a different variety? Is it just like one differentiating factor?
Yeah, it's usually geography.
Okay.
So when it's at the variety level, it's usually something that we're not exactly sure about. It's either geography or it's pollinator or it's something else. But what you're going to see throughout the entire Trillium garden is how these plants are taking advantage of the niches that are available to them. If plants bloom at the exact same time, well, they have to have something differentiating them. They have to have a different pollinator, they have to have a different scent, they have to have something. Otherwise, they're not going to be speciating at all. They're not going to be becoming different species.
So we talked about the disturbance of trilliums, and that's obviously something that they don't like to be disturbed. But what are some of the other factors that are affecting trillium populations?
I think everyone's aware of the ginseng woes that we have, where ginseng is being harvested from the wild, essentially being poached, taken without permission, and used in the botanical industry for cosmetics and that kind of thing. Well, the same sort of thing happens for Trillium. It's not something that's widely thought of, but it's also not something that's widely cultivated. It's difficult to grow. It's a very long-term crop, and it's an expensive crop. And so often Trillium is taken from the wild and sold by the garbage bag full to these companies.
Do they use the rhizome or the leaf, or?
You know, I'm not sure which part of the plant
Okay.
they're using, but when they're confiscated, we're seeing whole plants, like pulled up from the roots.
Oh, wow. It looks like we're coming upon some of the ones that are in flower.
Yes, this is Trillium cuneatum. And this one is fantastic because it's very variable.
Yeah.
You'll see this really fantastic maroon red color, but you'll also see a lighter, more coppery color on these plants. You'll see giant ones that just look like they're the size of your head, and then you'll have these really diminutive ones that are just tiny.
And is this also one that's native here, or?
Yes. Though Mount Cuba Center takes the definition on a regional level, right?
Yeah.
So we say native to the eastern temperate forests of the United States. This one is not specifically native to Delaware.
Okay. And now with this reddish flower, it reminds me something of, maybe like a carrion. What's pollinating these?
That is a great question.
Yeah.
Ultimately, we don't know.
Okay.
So we have many theories.
You mean you haven't sat out here for days looking at like what goes into that flower?
Or set up camera traps?
Yeah.
Yes, we've done that too. We don't have anything peer-reviewed that we can fall back on and say, yes, this is definitely the pollinator, this is definitely what's happening. We do need to do more research into that regard. But the theory is that the red ones are pollinated by insects looking for brooding sites, carrion eaters, insects that lay their eggs in carrion and that kind of thing. And then the light-colored ones, the ones that have a more sweet scent, are going to be pollinated by your bees and your flies and those kinds of things.
Did you ever try to smell? Is there a scent?
Oh yes, we'll do it.
Okay.
These ones aren't going to have a really strong smell.
Okay.
You can smell it though if you'd like.
Yeah.
It's not going to be anything near the foetidissimum though.
Okay. No, I don't really.
Smell anything?
I'm not getting anything.
Let's try the Trillium pusillum when we get to the garden. The thing is also that they're ephemeral. So they do their like quick push thing and then they're all done.
Right.
And the same thing is true for their pollination. So they're not going to produce volatile chemicals for the entire time that they're in bloom.
Exactly.
They might do it for like 1 or 2 days.
Right.
And those are the days that you'll see the insects on them, which also makes it a really difficult timing thing because depending on the weather, that's when they'll bloom. That's when they'll decide the time is right to get pollinated, put out those chemicals. And then if the insect is around, maybe he'll come pollinate it.
I could tell you really love your job.
I do. I do. It's
you have
very
just
obvious.
like this inner and outer euphoria about you. So how big is the area that you're working with as far as Trillium goes? Because you don't need that much of an area, I would imagine.
No, you really don't. The Trillium garden itself is very small, but we do have Trillium throughout the garden proper. The garden proper is roughly 63 acres. And but our conservation collections, which are here in the garden on our left, are roughly 84 taxa or kinds of Trillium.
And that's the national collection?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
we hold the national collection. We've been accredited by the American Public Gardens Association for the last 20 years, I believe. And through that partnership have really pulled together an amazing collection of plants. It's not very often that you can see so much diversity in a plant group in one place like this.
What's the best, I know you said some are in bloom now.
Yes.
If we came in like 1 or 2 more weeks, like when is the optimal time to actually see the most blooms of your Trillium?
Typically the end of April is the best time to see the most diversity because you're going to get the big sweeps of Trillium. And look at this. Trillium sessile just opened today. He was not open yesterday, so I'm so glad making an appearance for your visit.
Yeah.
And back here is my only blooming snow Trillium this year.
Oh wow!
I have
just that little tiny one right there.
I have 3 other populations that just did not come up this year.
Trailing Trillium. Is this one that has a habit like this, or why is it called that?
So that's a great question. Trillium decumbens, Latin name gets it because it's so close to the ground. It's decumbent.
Bashful Trillium?
It has this tendency for its flower to hang down for the insects, of course, that for whatever reason does not grow for our benefit.
Okay.
So it doesn't hold its petals up to the sky and let us humans see it. It hangs down under the leaves.
Yeah.
So it's facing down for those insects to come up and pollinate it. And it kind of has this umbrella-like effect with the leaves over top of it, protecting those petals.
And then are you also growing Trillium in the greenhouses as well, or is it just in its native habitat?
Yes, so we are conserving these plants ex situ, out of their native habitat. So usually when we go to a site, we'll collect seed. That allows us to capture the most genetic diversity possible while not harming the population's ability to reproduce in the future. So we'll bring the seed home, that'll grow in the greenhouse for about 1 season. Then they'll put it out into the lath houses are more exposed to the general environment for the remaining 3 to 5 years until it's ready to come out into the garden. Then we lift and bring the Trillium out here if it's going to be a part of our conservation collection, or elsewhere in the garden if it's going to be a part of our landscape collection. But Trillium seed is a little bit unique. They call it recalcitrant. It does not store in a traditional seed bank. So it has this really fleshy elaiosome packet on it that encourages ants and other insects really to walk away with it.
Yeah.
If you've ever seen a Trillium ring around trees in the forest, it's because an ant took that Trillium seed and started taking it home to his nest and got tired about halfway up the tree, dropped it, and it formed a little ring around the tree itself. And so you have these fatty packets that insects really love and will carry away, but those same attributes that make it so beneficial to its pollinators and associated taxa make it difficult for it to store. You can't dry it out, you can't store it long term. So if we want to conserve these species here at Mount Cuba, we have to do it in living form.
I see.
So we won't go into the little room because that's more of the grandiflorum types that bloom later in the season. But I'm dying to see if this foetidissimum is open for you to smell.
That's be amazing.
Yes.
Seeded Trillium, so I'd imagine this is what?
This is the one that is most often cited as smelling like carrion.
It doesn't have an open flower though, it looks
Unfortunately, no. Or, you know, depending upon the sniffer, it could also smell like yogurt, wet feet,
like
yeast.
a kefir maybe?
Yes, yes, like a fermentation thing going on. And you can, the modeling is similar from species to species, but it's definitely different. I mean, this is a different kind of pattern than the one that we saw earlier.
Yeah.
You have more of that green central vein, that stripe-like look.
And is the kind of common belief is this, because we see this modeling in tropical plants, obviously in tropical forests as well, is the idea that because the sunlight comes in and it's more like the dappled shade, so is it more of a camouflage thing, or is it more of protecting the chlorophyll of the plant?
It could be either.
Yeah.
I don't have any definitive evidence one way or another, but it certainly helps them blend into the forest floor.
Yes, that's true.
So there's that aspect of it, and they are delicious. So I can imagine them looking for ways to prevent the deer from taking notice of them.
There's a deer exclusion fence around here. You probably wouldn't see any of this if there were deer.
That is also true.
Yeah. That's why I hope when we have our deer exclusion fence that we might actually see some native Trillium pop up.
Yes, there is the potential for that.
If you are enjoying the videos we produce here at Flock, we would appreciate if you give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. We're committing 10% of our Google AdSense revenue back into the Finger Lakes area, which is matched by our partners over at Espoma Organic. It's just a small way where we can all contribute and see a community thrive and grow. We'll see you in the next video.